Well, hey, right on time to the second. Hello, everybody. Right, okay, so this presentation is why eat less, move more doesn't work, okay? You know the advice I'm talking about. Burn more calories than you consume, create a calorie deficit. It's said that losing weight is very easy, really. I love this quote from Mark Twain. It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. Fantastic. Okay, so eat less, move more, but burn more calories than you're consuming. Anyone who's ever tried it knows that it works. Well, it works at first, but very few have ever managed to make it work long term. In my personal experience, and that is so many of my patients, and probably your experience too, seeing as you're on this course, is that whilst it seems to be like a good idea, it rarely helps people with long-term weight loss. And it's a lovely idea, really. It's such a simple concept, and it's a concept that's so simple that anyone can do it. And we're told the reason we gain weight is eating more than we're burning. Too many calories in and not enough exercise to burn it off. So if you eat too much and don't burn it off, then that excess energy is stored as fat. So the solution is simple. Just do the opposite. Eat less and move more. And, you know, this is backed up by our government and public health organisations. They all tell us that we must cut out the fatty, those high-calorie foods, eat smaller portions, take regular exercise, and we'll lose weight. Yeah, and doctors, dietitians, nutritionists, fitness professionals all repeat this eat less, move more mantra. In order to lose weight, you just have to create a calorie deficit. And of course, we've got apps that track food intake, energy burn through exercise, and they'll even give you this predicted weight loss. I promise I'm not going to have too many quotes in today's. There's always a well-known solution to every human problem, neat, plausible, and wrong, by Henry Louis Mencken. Eat less and move more is certainly neat and plausible. It's seductively simplistic. And if it was that simple, everybody who'd ever tried it and wanted to lose weight would have been successful. But today, in this lesson, you're going to learn why you're pretty much doomed to failure when you started out. So what we're going to go through in this lesson is 4 major problems with eat less, move more. You're going to be introduced to 4 studies that exemplify these problems. And you're going to understand that weight loss can't be simply tricked by manipulating calories. Our bodies resist long-term weight loss. So, what we hope will happen. We start a diet with a clear plan, success just being a few steps away, just eat fewer calories. Get out jogging, join a gym, and you will lose weight. The pounds start to disappear, and what we hope will happen is that our bodies will adjust to this new lower calorie, higher exercise regime, and the weight will stay off long term. We hope that we're going to adapt to this. But unfortunately, what seems should happen rarely actually does. And I think this will help you understand why. We are born survivors. There's millions of years of evolution have led our bodies to developing systems to cope with little or no food. It's only in the last few thousand years since the advent of agriculture that we've had consistent food supplies, really. So our ancestors, every single one of your ancestors, survived those harsh conditions. I mean, every one of them, going back to the dawn of time. You are the end of an unbroken chain. Survival of the fittest, those who are able to withstand those harsh variations of food supply, have made us into the humans we are today. By calorie restricting to lose weight, we're not just trying to lose our own expanding weight lines. What we're actually trying to do is fight millions of years of evolution. So the body isn't easily tricked. It would be great if it was that easy. Anyone with enough willpower could be successful at dieting. But there's 2 powerful processes that start within our body in response to calorie restriction. Firstly, a decrease in energy expenditure. And secondly, an increase in hunger. These are some really, really key studies that I want to go through here. The Minnesota starvation experiments, fantastically interesting studies. They were carried out during World War II. Conscientious objectors were asked to volunteer in medical research to learn how to best treat the victims of starvation from the war in Europe. After establishing a baseline, the calorie intake of participants was restricted from a normal level to just under 1,600 calories a day for a 6-month period. Now, that figure may surprise some of you because it did me. It's not dissimilar to what we willingly restrict our daily intake to on a low-calorie diet, but this was considered semi-starvation. Okay. Funnily enough, it did result in significant decline in their physiological processes. Things like their body temperature was being measured to decrease, the heart rate was measured to be decreased, their breathing rate had fallen. Basically, what's happening is, even on a 1,600 calorie diet, everything is dropping in order to try and conserve energy. They also had significant psychological effects, decline in concentration. They became socially withdrawn and had severe emotional distress. You have to bear in mind this was a time of war, so we can't say everything was purely down to the experiment. It was a pretty difficult time. But one guy actually amputated 3 of his own fingers with an axe. Really strangely, he wasn't sure whether he'd done it by accident or not. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing that our bodies see weight changes as a problem. Some more recent studies which have been really interesting. In 1995, a group of 41 people were put into a nutrition lab, so like a controlled environment, so that they could be studied without influence from the outside world. 18 obese people, 23 who had never been obese. And firstly, the researchers fed the patients a high-calorie diet, so they gained 10% weight. And what they found was very interesting. They found that the subject's energy expenditure increased by 500 calories per day in response. So basically what's happening is their bodies were trying to compensate for that extra calorific intake in order to prevent the body gaining weight. Then what happened is they reduced the calories back down to normal to get them back down to a normal weight. And funnily enough, their energy burned went back down to a normal level. Then they continued the study and tried to restrict the calories in order to make them drop a further 10% of their body weight. But funnily enough, their energy expenditure also dropped. Okay, so the body is compensating and resisting changes in weight at every step of the way. So, yeah, absolutely fascinating, because this shows that the body has effective mechanisms that resist weight change. And importantly, for those of us trying to lose weight, it shows that when we're on a low-calorie diet, our bodies try to conserve energy to prevent weight change. So Eat Less, Move More relies on us creating a calorie deficit, but a calorie deficit is useless if your body is reducing the amount of energy it uses in order to preserve its own weight. So you start your diet, and it might be a few weeks, it might be a few months, but eventually the scales aren't moving as fast as they were. The weight loss slows down. The initial progress you were making in the first few weeks isn't happening. Maybe the scales were broken, because you're doing exactly the same thing, but inexplicably your weight loss has slowed down. You're doing everything right, you're doing everything you were doing, and at this point you probably double down on your diet or put in a few extra sessions at the gym. Eventually, despite your best efforts, things just seem to grind to a halt, or even worse, you actually gain weight. And you're doing nothing different, but you're starting to get really frustrated. You want to keep pushing on with things, but you're starting to feel tired. It starts to creep up on you. Maybe you're finding that you can't run that far on the treadmill at the gym, and eventually your resolve starts to get tested. But you are tired. It's not you being lazy, it's your body actually shutting down and trying to make you conserve energy. So now what? Well, that might be the end of your diet. You might be able to push on through that plateau. You might be a freak of nature who can tolerate that calorie restriction, because some people can. Very, very rarely, though. You might put on some extraordinary feat of willpower. You see, what we hope will happen is, 1, we lose weight. 2, we adjust and we keep it off. Remember what I said earlier. So is it possible that if we manage to lose weight, our bodies will actually eventually get used to it? So there was a 2008 study that looked at the energy expenditure of a group of people at different stages of weight loss and helped spread some light on this issue. First, they found a group of people who had never lost weight. These were people that were at their lifetime maximum weight. The second group were the same as the first group in terms of weight, but had recently lost 10% of their body weight on a calorie-restricted diet to get there. Okay, so given problem number 1, the body compensates for and resists changes in weight, we would expect the recent weight loss group to have a reduced energy expenditure compared to people of the same weight who had never been dieting. And that is exactly what the study had found. The recent weight loss group had a significantly lower energy expenditure than the non-weight loss group. The researcher also found a third group of people, some of those rare individuals that had lost 10% of their body weight and managed to sustain it for over a year. Now, the time is really key here, because if we are able to get used to an eat less, move more diet, we would expect the energy expenditure to have returned to normal. And of course, it hadn't, okay? They found that the energy expenditure of the third group was very similar to the group who had recently lost weight, suggesting that even after a year, our body is still trying to compensate for the weight lost by reducing our energy expenditure. So, problem number 2. The drop in energy expenditure doesn't improve with time. The second mechanism that our bodies use to maintain our weight is hunger. Hunger is a process that's under chemical control in the body. Those chemicals are called hormones. This is a kind of slide that I want to use throughout our sessions, which is, I don't want to assume anything in terms of like biological knowledge. Okay, I want to make it even for everybody, even though I'm sure some of you absolutely know what hormones are, okay? But hormones are a chemical message that is produced by the body that causes an effect somewhere else in the body, okay? You've probably heard of some hormones, things like insulin, which is produced by the pancreas, which, as we're going to see later on, insulin controls the level of sugar in our blood. Melatonin is produced by a gland in the brain, controls your biological clock. Adrenaline, the adrenal glands, which are just next to the kidneys, produce adrenaline, which raises your heart rate and prepares your body for rapid activity. But hunger is also under hormonal control. Hormones make us hungry. Now, there are lots of different hormones that deal with hunger, but the most important one, and the one I talk about today, is this one called ghrelin. Okay, ghrelin is produced by the lining of the stomach. It tells the brain that we're hungry. So levels of ghrelin drop after a meal and then increase in the hours following it. And we've got some great studies that show about hormones on a calorie-restricted diet. We've got ghrelin levels before the diet at 10 weeks. Ghrelin levels before are, of course, normal. And if somebody is on a calorie-restricted diet for about 10 weeks, those hunger hormones, as you expect, would be elevated. And remember, we're going back to that thing about does your body adapt to this over time? So they also measured those same people after a year of being on a calorie-restricted diet, and those hunger hormones are still raised even after a year. So problem number 3 is a calorie deficit makes us hungrier. Problem number 4 is those hunger hormones, they stay raised in the long term. So what actually happens, rather than lose weight and getting used to that weight loss, is we lose weight loss stops, and instead of becoming used to that new lower calorie regime, our bodies begin to compensate, our hunger increases, we become weak, we become tired, exercise becomes more difficult, you stop going to the gym, and eventually, despite your best efforts with willpower, it is impossible to fight your hormones. So you give up and the diet ends. Now, falling off your diet after starting it with the best of intentions is pretty disheartening. I'm going to show you some graphs of my weight loss later. I've been there many times before I discovered what I'm teaching you on this course. Hopefully now you've realised that if you failed at dieting before, using a calorie restricted diet, it's not your fault. It never was your fault. And I just want to remember, I think this is the final quote I've got in this. The words of Albert Einstein. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So I'm so glad that you've decided to do things differently this time. So the key learning points before we close down for Q&As is that our bodies have powerful mechanisms that resist changes in weight by calorie restriction. Our bodies burn less energy, and hormones will make us feel more hungry, and our bodies just don't get used to calorie restricting. Right, that is session number 1. I'm going to leave it there then, okay? Any more questions you've got, ping them in the Facebook group. I'll get back to you there. Thanks for your patience. I will see you on Thursday.